Talk Shoe. Recorded live.
Hello, and welcome to the Castle Dracula Horror Movie Podcast. On this podcast, we talk about horror movies, vampire movies, and all-around awesomeness. And this week, in observance of the recent passing of one of the greats of fantasy filmmaking, we continue our special Ray Harryhausen retrospective series with the 1953 giant monster movie, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about from the perspective of horror fans who have, so warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the Alex Van Helsing series from HarperCollins and the upcoming game, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows from Activision. With me are, from Austin, Drew Edwards, writer of the long-running webcomic Halloween Man, a contributing writer to Rockabilly Online, and the writer of an upcoming issue of Tales from the Grave for Monsterverse Comics. Say hello, Drew.
Hello, Drew.
Hello. Also in Austin, special guest, Jamie Barr, a musician, pinup model, educator, and the lead vocalist and upright bassist for Austin's premier all-female rock and roll band Danger Cakes, where you can find info on their new album Dessert First from Deep Eddy Records at www.dangercakes.net. I love that name, Danger Cakes. Say hello, Jamie.
Hello.
After all of that. Yes, and in Los Angeles, special guest Adam Foshko, screenwriter and creative producer for the highly successful Skylanders series, as well as Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, the viralicious horror action game Prototype 2, and the upcoming Call of Duty Online. Wow, I wish I could just ask you questions about Call of Duty Online, honestly. Say hello.
Wish I could answer.
Say hi, Adam.
Hi.
Hi. All right. And you have a special connection to tonight's movie that I hope we get to hear about. Okay. The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms is a 1953 science fiction giant monster film directed by Eugene Leray, starring Paul Christian, Paula Raymond, and Cecil Kellaway, with visual effects by Ray Harryhausen, who is, in theory, why we're here. The film is about an atomic bomb test in the Arctic Circle that unfreezes a hibernating dinosaur, the fictional Rhedosaurus, which begins to wreak havoc in New York City. It was one of the first monster movies that helped inspire the following generation of giant creature features. So I want to get people's first impressions, and I'm really genuinely dying to know what you guys thought of this. And so let's go Drew, Adam, Jamie, and then I'll go. So Drew, lay it on us. Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, first impressions.
I am a sucker for 50s monster movies, so I think I'm probably going to be the person that liked this movie the most, but I have to say, as a Ray Harryhausen movie, there's two types of Ray Harryhausen movies. This is a movie where Ray Harryhausen was hired on to do special effects. The creature work here, for the most part, is great. It's a very memorable-looking design. In fact, I'm looking at a picture in my office right now. However, when we think of a Ray Harryhausen movie, we think of stuff like what we did last week, Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. As far as his dinosaur pictures, probably the standout one is Valley of the Gwangi with the cowboys versus dinosaurs. So with that in mind, it kind of pales in comparison because it's not really, a lot of what's less entertaining about it. This is a plot that was repeated so many times after this movie came out that it seems kind of stale in that respect. But that's my first impression.
Okay, all right. Adam, tell me your connection here, and also I want to know your thoughts about Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
Well, I'll follow up in a moment with my sort of special connection to this picture, and say that when you try to get the first impression of this film, in my case in particular, we may be of the same age category where I can say this and it makes sense to you too. There is the lens through which you see this when you're a kid, and you see stills of it, and you read about it in books, and you kind of see bits and pieces of it. You don't always catch like a whole chunk of it, on television or something. But in my case, I searched for this film, and at the time, there were not VHS copies of this laying around, so I was literally looking in the back of, copies of famous monsters of Filmland to try and find copies, and you could find 15 millimeter prints of it and I was one of those people who had a 16 millimeter projector, and a 3/4 inch VCR. So these are the two things the first thing I ever recorded on my VCR was War of the Worlds, the George Powell version. And
wow, that's amazing. I think honestly the first thing I ever recorded on my VCR was War of the Worlds. Honest
of course
to God.
you did. Yeah, I mean that makes sense. But when I had a VCR, it was nobody else had one. It was from a studio, and it had a big piano keys and a lever that would pick up this giant 3/4 inch deck. But Beast from 20,000 Fathoms was rarely on. You literally had to go try and track it down. And I remember seeing it in its totality. It's actually in Los Angeles when I was here. It was playing at a theater, and I went to go see it on the big screen. And I was pretty young. I was a kid, and there was so much anticipation. You know, we had monster movies, sort of sleepover nights or whatever, because again, a kid. But I actually went and sat and literally sat in the second row, maybe even the first row, breathless, just with my eyes glued to the screen as, looking at Harryhausen's effects. And they were astonishing. This is one of the more influential pictures when it came to even sort of my thinking about effects in films and working in film and doing really anything in media was, this kind of thing on this scale. I'd seen King Kong. I'd seen, Mighty Joe Young. I mean, I'd seen different things. And incidentally, my favorite Ray Harryhausen picture is actually Earth versus the Flying Saucers. I still think that's amazing. But seeing this, it was the most amazing thing. Now, come to find out, I watched this film again fairly recently, and I'd always sort of known it was there. In the intervening years, I discovered that my great uncle actually was one of the producers of this film, Hal Chester. And it's really, because you didn't know this when you asked me to come on this week.
No,
it's really
not at all.
Coincidental. So it's really.
Did you know that growing up? Like, hey, uncle, my uncle was the producer on this, or was
I
that
did. I knew about it just a little bit later, kind of after I'd seen it. I was already aware of it. And then I was really, of course, incredibly impressed at that point. That he had done that. It was the most amazing thing. And I got to learn a little bit about kind of how it was done. One or two sort of things. But in seeing it again, I have to tell you, there are certain, which I'll just say are canon. The same kind of moments, I think, that resonate in the whole milieu of the sort of giant, radioactive monsters from the deep coming. Even I think you can see it repeated in It Came From Beneath the Sea, another Ray Harryhausen. But this part of it came from Bradbury story, which we'll talk about in a minute. But seeing it again, you see these moments which you sit there and you go, God, this is awesome. This is awesome. This is exactly what makes this film great, these key moments. And then you get to the connective tissue between those moments, and it's like being put in a sleeper hole. It just knocks you out. And you just go, oh, this is what's the story again? It's sort of like The Terror, where you're going, I've seen it 1,000 times, but I'm not sure what the story is.
That is exactly, yes.
I've never been able to figure out what The Terror is about. But in this case, and I've seen it, but in this case, I see the picture, I know the story of the Beast of 20,000 Fathoms, but as I watch it, I watch the great moment with the lighthouse, I watch the great, I watch the police officer being bitten by the head and picked up and swallowed, all those things, great bits. But in between, I'm going, wow, I feel so sleepy. I'm like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz in the Field of Poppies. And I'm just trying to keep it together, going, I must watch this. And, oh, dear. It's a great picture. But I think just because I'm looking at it through the lens of so much time has passed and I'm used to a faster-paced picture, this is like Cloverfield on Quaaludes. Is really what this is. And it's a canon picture. It's amazing. It's groundbreaking. It's seminal. but it's hard to sort of really watch and have it be a complete experience. So
okay, I want to stop you there so that you can save some, because actually this is really great, and I think we'll get. But I mean, that's wonderful, and I think you actually are summing up how I'm going to feel. But I'm curious, Jamie, what were your because you have not been subjected to nearly as many of these movies as me and Adam and Drew, so I pity you and I welcome you to the show. What did you think?
I think Drew has a box set. For all of our listeners out there, this scandalous moment. I'm married to one of the other hosts. So we live together. And Drew actually owns the box set. And when he watches a movie, chances are I'm probably watching it too. Not all the time, but
yeah. So you're suffering for this.
I have been subjected. Yes, I wouldn't say it's suffering. It's funny because I watched this movie and I felt like it was like Mystery Science Theater 3000 minus, the little alien guys, the little robots. Like I found myself the entire time just heckling it, which was fun. I had a good time. It felt like it should be a heckled movie, and it's like, with the wooden ways that they're speaking and everything like that. But I don't know. I had a good time watching it because of that. But I did enjoy the actual, creature design as well. I thought it was a pretty cool monster, and Drew and I would be discussing about how they did certain effects, and when the creature ends up eating the guy and all that great stuff. It's pretty amazing how they do something like that, and record each frame shot by shot by shot by shot by shot. And so much time and work goes into it. So I think about that, and it makes it a little less boring, I guess, to me. But it is kind of, I can see where everybody, says that they want to, pass out. A lot of times we did pass out while watching the movie. I think it probably took us like 3 evenings of watching. Usually, like
You're
I fall
kidding.
asleep really later movies. No, I'm not just kidding.
No, she's not kidding.
That's funny.
Like it put me out a few times, but if I wasn't like awake and heckling and making jokes constantly, I just kind of would doze off.
So Adam says this one is like being put in a sleeper hold. You say no, it's enjoyable in its way if you spread it out across 3 nights. And
yeah, if you want to go to bed to it. It's funny. It reminds me of like my first experience with the Ray Harryhausen movies actually wasn't with Drew. It was with my babysitter when I was a kid, and it was what she put on to lull the kids to sleep.
Oh,
like it was enough that would, it was enough that she would, she knew they weren't going to be scary enough to like actually scare the kids, but they would watch it and then kind of pass out. And that's what I remember doing. That was the only time I remember seeing Sinbad when I was a kid, and I remember passing out, and I remember the little boy and stuff like that. Like everything, every Harryhausen movie I've seen, it's weird because it's like little flashes come back to me like a child's memory, because I haven't seen them since I was literally probably, maybe 4 or 5. And so, to see them again, I understand saying, we look at something with different eyes. And in this case, I definitely do look at them with different eyes. But I also crack up because
closed.
of the whole, they're closed, but it still has the same effect, oddly enough. But it kind of cracked me up a lot about how the modern wonders of radiation and all that technology. I love the idea of basically a biochemical weapon of sorts, because from this monster, and it's like, and I feel like I know everyone's saying it's the predecessor for Godzilla, but you almost wonder if the whole thing with the bacteria and all that stuff, if that is really directly related to as well, because with the Godzilla they have a whole different take on the whole radiation thing. But
some of you will have to explain to me some of the radiation plots in here. I mean, some of the plot points involving radiation, especially towards the end, because I'm confused and I think I may have missed something. I possibly was sleeping, but okay, all right. here's my very, very quick first impression, and then we'll go on to why we're really here, which is the Ray Harryhausen creature, and then this killer lead. Okay, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Boy, Adam had it exactly right when he said that the experience of watching it is like watching The Terror, which is a movie that I love to look at. Any particular moment of The Terror, I can be thrilled just to stare at that moment of The Terror. I've watched The Terror many, many times. Both of them are about 80 minutes long, meaning these are short movies, and yet I could not, under torture, explain to you what happens in either of those movies. You just watch them and you just kind of go, it's like a waking sleep, and it's beautiful. But so that is a problem here. And as a writer, I want to keep thinking about this as I watch this and go, what is going on? Why are some of these things in the story not working? The connective tissue that Adam was talking about. What could you do if the point of the connective tissue is to get between the good bits and not get in their way? What is missing that we didn't put in? Is it an interesting lead? I don't know. So that's what I want to keep thinking about is if we're rejecting this in our mind, why are we rejecting it? But okay. So and by the way, I agree with you. This would make a great MST3K because they'd fill up the dead space with jokes, or even Adam was mentioning Svengoolie. It'd be a really good Svengoolie. Yeah. There's also a thing that people may not know about, but once upon a time there was this company called Castle Films, not to be confused with William Castle, and they would take movies like this and just make a highlight reel, just like a 15-minute highlight thing that they would put at the library, and you check it out, and it'd be Beast from, it'd be like House of Dracula or whatever.
Oh yeah, those guys. I remember those guys.
It was only the good parts. This movie could use a Castle Film version. If they had a Castle Film version, I would have watched that instead of this. But okay, so let's get into the creature itself. And the good bits with the creature, because mainly the point of this movie, and certainly the point of our discussing it, is Ray Harryhausen's work on this giant monster and all the crazy stuff that it does. So I've talked enough. Does anybody want to throw out, what they thought of Harryhausen's creature?
Well, I have to say I love how blatantly unscientific it is.
Yeah.
I love dinosaur movies. I love dinosaur movies, but I hate the fact that they become. And I love Jurassic Park, but the thing that the effect that Jurassic Park has had is everybody wants these incredibly scientifically accurate dinosaurs, or as close to it as you can have within the framework of a monster movie.
Yeah.
This is just it is a dinosaur, but it's a dinosaur in the very loosest terms, is that it's basically this giant rampaging iguana.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Although wait, let me stop you there. Because what it isn't, thankfully, is the 1960 and change equivalent, like with The Lost World, where basically they really were iguanas with like fins stuck on them, and we were forced to watch them.
No. The effects
were so much better.
Is gorgeous. The effect, like I was actually just remarking to Jamie earlier that I think Godzilla, the original Japanese Godzilla, is a better film than this.
Oh,
it is. This has much better special effects.
I totally agree with you. And Raymond Burr, but that's a different animal.
Well, we now have the benefit of DVD, so we don't even have to watch the version of Raymond Burr. But that's a whole other discussion altogether.
To this day, I've not seen Godzilla without Raymond Burr. I don't even know. To me, it's like how recently they've re-released Meet the Beatles. Only it's like as originally produced, and there was an American mix, and that's the one that everybody grew up listening to. I don't want to listen to this new corrected Meet the Beatles, and I'm not sure I want to see Godzilla without Raymond Burr either. I understand,
You have the benefit of seeing both, though, and I actually think both versions complement each other well. I grew up with Godzilla with Raymond Burr in it. That's the version I always saw, and that's the version most American kids grew up with. But there's no reason to not see the Japanese film because it's interesting in its contradiction.
That's a good idea. So you were saying that there's this problem with this is now. So what do they call it? Do they call it a dinosaur in the movie? I'm literally trying to remember.
Yeah, it's called a dinosaur. It's called a dinosaur. I mean, they even like two of the main characters are even paleontologists.
A paleontologist, the leading paleontologist in the world, happens to have a sketch of the Rhedosaurus. Rhedosaurus. Apparently, it has a decent picture, which, by the way, is not far from the poster, but that's a different thing.
It does look like an early draft of the poster, honestly.
And for that matter, the headline that the heroine holds up later looks very similar to that image. However, if you even as kids, we saw this and went, wait a minute, this is a dinosaur this is not a dinosaur. This is something else. We got that it was prehistoric. We it was in the ice. We didn't go. It's like nothing we've seen. This is not like a real dinosaur. It's something else. But it was still cool. And the fact that it did all the really cool things was really good enough. And again, I love this movie. I do. But I love sort of all the moments. Like you said earlier, Jason. What would you do as a writer to enhance the moments, the connective tissue between, bouts of, of doses of the amazing creature work that Harryhausen did, and it really was amazing. There's a lot you could really do. I mean, for starters, I think that the story that they kind of whipped up around it was sort of like not an excuse, but it was like they tried to make this an appealing thing for an audience. It was the scare of radiation during this time. There was one of my favorite movies also of all time is Them. And it echoes a lot of the same elements. It's like, it's the bomb and the testing in the desert. It has created.
Okay, well let's actually get into it a little bit. It's a good point. And in a way, you're right that this movie, it does give you, doesn't it, that good feeling that those movies give you about these super smart, super well-funded 1950s government scientists who are like the manly men of all science, And in this case, we start like way up at the North Pole, and we have this government expedition, and I can't remember what exactly it is that they're out doing, but
they're dropping an atomic bomb.
Yeah. They're doing the.
And I have to say, I love this sequence because it reminds me a lot of The Thing.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that. It reminded me too of The Thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I kept thinking of certainly The Thing, but also oddly enough things like This Island Earth and stuff like that had, and George Powell's War of the Worlds again with this sort of there's this notion in the 50s of these manly scientists who could like do anything. They were literally, they were sort of. It's like we had taken this national angst about people like Wernher von Braun and sort of sanitized them into these wonderful muscular scientific Jesus figures who would get us through anything. I find that really charming. But okay, yeah, they're doing atomic testing. Two guys are out. I can't remember exactly why they are out on their own.
Checking radiation.
They're doing radiation detection, and basically one of them falls, injures himself, and sees the big lizard. He calls for our hero, Professor Nesbitt, played by what is Paul Christian? Is he Swedish? I mean, I can't remember what his nationality is.
He's Christopher Lambert from the 1950s.
He's a foreigner.
He's Swiss.
They all sound like there's so many French Canadians in this picture too. So it's just sort of like
no, I know, and he has that wonderful.
He's got himself a fruity European accent.
He's
don't like it.
He's a very, very handsome scientist actor
with a Bogart trench coat.
Right? And anyway, he finds his buddy just before his buddy dies, and he is deeply injured himself. The army grabs him, drags him back to their little encampment and then back to civilization because he's been roughed up by the dinosaur. And he's the only witness to the fact that when they were doing this atomic test, they awakened a four-legged sort of giant reptile. And the geeks who are into this movie insist that although it's not technically a dinosaur, it's a perfectly viable prehistoric, quadrupedal reptile, which I think is just trying too hard. I mean, it's a great-looking giant thing that they call a dinosaur, and we'll be content to do that. And let's see, he goes back, and so while we follow his plot of trying to explain to people that he really did see this giant creature, the creature itself starts making a beeline for the United States, apparently because it's the place where it would spawn. It's egg-laying spot.
No. It's the title. It's title.
Yeah, it's egg-laying spot. It was the East Coast. It's the Hudson, and this is some neat stuff.
It's where I grew up.
This is all taking place around where Jamie grew up.
Yeah, I want to. By the way, let's save the bit with the diving bell because that's probably to me that's the best part of the whole movie. But along the way, as he's headed for the East Coast, he comes to. There's this great sequence where the creature attacks a lighthouse.
Okay, wait. Now, let me stop you there just for a second, okay?
Okay. Have I got it backwards?
No, there's the ship and all that too. But
yeah. Okay. Well, you tell me. Show me the wrath of destruction of this creature.
No, you're on the right track. But here's the one thing I would. This relates to sort of like one of the stories that I know about this. There are two things. Ray Bradbury is also one of my favorite authors.
Okay.
So there are two things about Bradbury that I discovered later that I thought was amazing. One is that he wrote the screenplay for Moby Dick, which amazed me. The second thing was that apparently he was working on he was working on a short story called The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. So this is same time. This is like 61. This is film came out in 51, so same time. So what happened was he was working on a short story called The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, and the whole thing is basically that the creature comes up from the sea. A prehistoric creature comes up from the sea, making a calling sound, and then sees a lighthouse in the fog. There's a foghorn and everything else, and if I remember correctly, it totally destroys the lighthouse, probably presumably with the lighthouse keepers in it. And so there's a whole thing about this. It's called The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Now, that whole bit is in this picture, principally because apparently my great uncle and his producing partner contacted Ray Bradbury to come and work on the script. They saw, could you work on the script? Could you come and do this? And they bought the rights to this story. I think the original name of the picture was not Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. It was something else, like Monster from the Sea or Monster from Beneath the Sea, something like that. And they bought if I remember correctly, they bought the rights to this picture, to the short story, to trying to get Bradbury to work on it. And Bradbury then also he changed the name of the short story from Beast from 20,000 Fathoms to, I think it was The Fog or Out of the Fog.
It's the lighthouse.
Oh.
Or the foghorn or the lighthouse, something like that. So that's what it is. That they took the title for this picture from that story and from their work with Bradbury. So in that principal moment, whenever you see this picture, or clips from it, it's always the lighthouse bit or the walking down the middle of New York bit, and that's just one of the principal kind of I guess monikers, identifiers of this picture, and it actually came from Bradbury, which I thought was really interesting. So now, please go on with the tale of destruction.
Well, the lighthouse thing is really awesome. I mean, I got to say, I was actually awake for that scene because the two guys working in the lighthouse were great. You know, they're having a good time. They're chummy. You kind of get the sense that they've got this little community of two where they hang out in the lighthouse and they do the job. And then along comes a monster and eats them. I mean, and that actually was really pretty.
Just a tail.
No, crushes them. So you're exactly.
We don't see them eating about it.
No, that's correct. He does not eat the people in the lighthouse. He does later chomp a cop in half, but in this case, he does. Yeah, he attacks the lighthouse, and I thought that's terrible. We just got all that character bit, all that stuff, all that character development for those two guys working in that lighthouse. By the way, more character development than we get for the lead, I gotta say. And then
let's face it. The lead is more. The monster has more life than the lead does, right? The lead is made of more rubber than the monster is.
It's hard to imagine if you put a charismatic actor in this role, because you have this actor who's just very handsome, and as he's investigating the monster,
I'm sure he was fine.
Yeah, he goes. So he goes. While the monster is making its way towards the eastern seaboard, the lead, he goes to the university to look up this other scientist. I think it's I can't remember it. Just another scientist, anyway, and he who becomes his key expert in studying the monster. And the key expert has a beautiful assistant who's also a scientist, and they have their little love story. So we introduce a romance into it. However, once again, this guy is really only handsome. That's really as far as it goes with him. Paul Raymond is smitten with him, and that's okay. But
they don't even the romance stuff doesn't even they seem almost more like schoolmates or something. Like they're just coming together because they have to be. There's
she comes over to his house. She comes over to his house and brings him sketches so he can look through it, and she makes him dinner while he works.
Great, but they're reading through all these lines with all the
yes.
Gee, maybe it's like high school drama.
It's really about the sort of like the triangle with the professor, right? It's really the professor is really the important ingredient here.
The professor is a great character.
He's great. Now do you guys know if that's the same professor from them? Because in my mind, I feel like it is.
I would not know. I do not know.
But he was really good. And you're right, Jason. Great scene in the diving bell. I mean, it's just the one where you go.
So let's get to this. We get Professor Elston is the one who's an expert. I can't remember. Is he an expert on dinosaurs? Okay.
No, he's the leading paleontologist in the world.
Right.
That's all
okay.
you need
So
to know.
Explain. So narrate for us, Adam, what happens with Professor Elston. They basically draft him to go down.
He wants to go. He's like, no, I have to go. First the lead is going to go, and the professor wants to go himself, so he goes in, has a cup of coffee with the two guys with the turtlenecks and the toques, and
they're in a diving bell. They're in this wonderful technology.
They're in a good one. They're not in the one that we always saw in films and in TV that had the bottom that didn't have a hatch or something that things would come up through every now and then. This one actually has a hatch and hot coffee and everything, and stock footage that runs outside the window when they're in the banks of the Hudson, in the Marianas Trench of the Hudson, because apparently they can see through with the light a shark and an octopus fighting. And
I really bought I know that this is a low budget. I know that this is a low budget movie, but I just really just how great would have a sequence of an octopus and a shark fighting done by Harryhausen? Instead we get footage.
Thank you. Thank you. That would have been so much better as opposed to going down to Marineland or wherever and seeing the shark and the octopus fight and cutting it in. And the professor, God love him, he's narrating it.
Yes.
What I want to know about is the Army guy just sits there, or Navy guy, I guess I should say, just sits there complacently while the professor is narrating, while the creature is encroaching on them, and he doesn't go, "Hey Doc, maybe we should mosey on back up to the ship now."
Yeah, what are you doing?
Well, first of all, I just want to point out. Oh yeah, well you're right. He's making coffee and biscuits, I suppose.
That's because he's National Guard. Oh.
But while they're down there, this is a dreamy sequence. It's got easily the most purple prose of the script, and I found it genuinely charming. Again, much like a lot like The Thing from Another World, because the professor says, what is it? Don't look so worried. We're scientists. This is our job, and this is a great moment for me. And then when he's down there, he goes, "We're leaving the world of untold tomorrows for a world of countless yesterdays." And then a shark fights a squid. I mean, and that's awesome, and he's drinking coffee, and he's watching this fight between the shark and the squid. As you point out, the helpful stock footage is playing outside the diving bell. But I loved it. And then all of a sudden he goes, the monster comes in view. And the monster is rolling around this giant trench. And by the way, I'm not from New York, so I was truly impressed with the amazing depth of this cavern. The Hudson Cavern or whatever.
Because it's amazingly deep.
Yeah, I mean, and I was.
It can hide a monster.
Actually, the Hudson River was created by a glacier, and there's actually like a fault line that is incredibly deep.
I agree with that. But the thing is,
the shark in the octopus, that's supposed to be like he's not supposed to. I don't believe that they're actually in the Hudson River yet. I guess there's like more out to sea at the point where the shark and sharktopus happens. Maybe they're not fighting. Maybe that was the beginning of Sharktopus. That's what I'm saying. Maybe it was just it just took that long for.
This is a canyon.
That was a love story.
I mean, this is a canyon below the water.
Yeah.
Sharktopus?
I like the fact that she worked in Sharktopus, the ongoing love story from 1951, basically to turn into Sharktopus.
Maybe that was the inspiration. See, here's yet another example of how this movie has still inspired generations.
Wait, Jamie, are you telling me that in Sharktopus that the Sharktopus monster comes from the Hudson Canyon?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's some scientists, but who knows?
Science.
It could have migrated. It might have found another type of current.
All I'm saying is that in the same way that when you think about it, think of a dog that's like the size of Godzilla, and then think of a dog that's the size of a horse. And which one are you more scared by? And somehow I'm more scared by a dog the size of a horse than the size of Godzilla. I don't know, because it could run around my house, bite people.
I don't know, but here's the thing. The thing walks on the bottom of the ocean, which,
right.
Actually, I understand why they probably did that, because, hard to animate something that is, free floating somewhere in the water when you do an underwater shot, so I sort of get that. But it obviously can swim or something because it impacts a boat in the middle of the ocean. But the fact that it just comes sauntering in next to a shark and an octopus, and then it's there. And then it does do a thing that, we saw it do earlier, so there's a payoff, which is it attacked the lighthouse earlier because of the light, and it attacked the diving bell because of its light. And you're all right when you say that somebody should have probably said something when the thing opens its mouth and begins to sort of go into the light, as opposed to the professor still going, and here's the most amazing thing.
That is actually his last line.
Suddenly. Oh, no. It's funny. That was the one thing that I said the whole time. From the very first moment they introduced the professor's character, I was just like, oh, that poor old guy's going to die.
Oh, you knew.
You just know. Oh. I knew. Like, seconds into the movie, I was like, oh.
Well, I was really surprised, and I was really amazed by the sense of scale. I love this whole sequence because the monster is walking in amongst these cliffs, you get a sense for how big he is, because he's next to the twist. You get a sense of what he's. Now, I suppose I should feel that way about Coney Island as well, but somehow I was just more impressed with him, with their dangling in this little thing that seems like a a thimble on a string, and then along comes this monster, and it's a wonder. I was really moved and impressed by that. Yes, and his last line, as he's watching all this, he goes, "Oh, the monster is this way, and he's big, and he's got 4 legs, and he's, and the most amazing thing is," and then it eats him. So, and that's the end of.
And again, why is that sailor so complacent about the whole thing? He says nothing, and I would be like, "What the hell is wrong with you, old man? We need to let's get that diving bell up there." It's I don't know.
But now the movie goes into high gear, because now the monster has tasted diving bell and he wants more. So he goes to Manhattan and he starts just running around, just busting things up. I mean, he goes through walls, he goes through buildings.
He occupies Wall Street.
There's a point where he approaches a line of cops in shotguns, and these are classic 1940s New York cops. They got those long leather coats. I love seeing those guys, with all their shotguns shooting at this giant monster. I mean, that's cool.
Not since The Dark Knight Rises have I seen, cops dressed that way. Oh, wait.
Oh, my gosh. I was thinking about that as well. Batman, 1989. Remember the Gotham City cops have these leather coats. Do they have them in the new
It's the same style. In the new one, too, yeah. With the Joker. It's the same kind of style.
Well, that's how cops dress in Gotham City. Haven't you seen Batman the Animated Series?
I guess.
Yeah, also true, right. It's all Art Deco, all from the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, these are some nice coats.
The thing that I love about the conceit in this movie...
True.
The thing that this movie does, and Jamie brought this up earlier, that no other monster movies copied, and I think that's a shame, is that the fact that this animal is radioactive makes its blood poisonous. And I think that is really neat. Yeah. So, every time he's getting shot and blood sprays out, people are getting radiation sickness.
It's an unexpected twist. And it's a really, really good one.
Radiation sickness from him. He's got they talk about the bacteria and whatnot.
Okay, that's right.
Somebody
tell us how this actually happens in the plot, because I'm completely. Okay. I just fell asleep.
The dinosaur itself is not radioactive, even though he was released in a radioactive manner. He himself is not radioactive. They have a radioactive isotope that they inject him with, and that's eventually how they,
I'm talking about when he's bleeding and poisoning people. Somehow I missed that whole plot.
That's a bloodborne pathogen. That's like outbreak. Think of Ebola, or
Okay.
Makes the police ill that are sort of following, and the police and the soldiers ill that are following the trail, and they determine it's from a disease that it's carrying. Which again, I mean, this is a pretty straightforward picture with a lot of straightforward things that become tropes for many other movies to follow. And you're right, Drew. It's not picked up anywhere else. This is a very unusual thing.
Nowadays, if they remade this, the blood would turn people into zombies or something like that.
Yeah, but this is a really great thing because it's a really unexpected complication and a consequence. And it's the reason. I know somebody sat there probably and said, "Oh, they just dropped an A-bomb on them." It's like, well, because it would spray the stuff everywhere and people would get sick. So we have to do something much more up close and personal, like hit him with a bazooka filled with an isotope. Which that hand waving, it was a great twist, but somehow with the isotope thing and then how they deliver it, I don't know. I think I'm looking at it again, with 2013 eyes. But even I think when I was a kid, I was like, wait, he's getting on a roller coaster and doing the thing, and they have to shoot him in the neck where they kind of shot him
no
before
pressure.
to do the.
No pressure.
I will completely buy. That in other words, in order that I might have the really truly excellent action scene where the guy is crawling around the roller coaster and trying to get the shot in, and there's suspense because of the where the different trains are at time. This is all a really, really well timed, suspenseful sequence. It's like one of the best sequences in the movie. To me, second to the trench. But I'll buy all of that and accept the hand waving. But it makes no sense at all. They may have well just said, you know what, Professor Alston left plans for a magic bullet that would kill dinosaurs if one ever got here. Because the whole point of like, let's do an isotope and put it in a bazooka, I don't understand any of that.
It's all part of the 1950s obsession with radiation, though. I mean, again, Jamie was just talking about this earlier.
It's like a giant vitamin. That's
Yeah.
Well, and you see. Go ahead. Go ahead, Jamie.
Well, it's like they're acting like radiation would be like a giant, almost vitamin type thing, where it would not only kill the bloodborne pathogen, but that's in the dinosaur itself or in the creature, and then also, it would also destroy the dinosaur's insides. But it's not because it,
what's interesting about this
they were testing out there.
You've got science as being sort of, it had won the war, right? So it had won the war. So the building up, you had the rise of the hunky scientists, portrayed in pictures because they were very, you had the old guys like, the paleontologists, but then you had the really hunky hero scientists. Science had won the war, and you had sort of a rise of these kinds of guys in these sorts of pictures. But, then there's the threat of radiation and atomic energy and what could it do and made things bigger, like in pictures like this and them and Attack of the Colossal Beast.
Godzilla really is the one that makes radiation actually seem scary, though.
But what's interesting about this picture is, again, it's science that prevails, and actually it's radiation. It's a form of radioactive solution that actually brings about an end to the creature. So it's sort of like science prevails again. Science and the hunky scientists really prevail again. As if to deliver a message that, there are unexpected consequences, but, heroic thinking men and science will restore order and save humanity. Maybe not Coney Island,
right?
But certainly humanity. And by the way, Drew, isn't this the last scene with the burning roller coaster, kind of reminiscent of the end of the Valley of the Goanji, with the burning building?
It is a bit at that, although I feel like Goanji is a much more... I think Guanji is a better movie than this.
It's a better movie.
Guanji is probably my favorite Ray Harryhausen movie.
It's a great movie, and also equally as hard to find. It was a hard picture to find for a long time.
I gotta say, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms was still pretty hard to find. I rented it from Amazon, but it wasn't available. Netflix doesn't have it. It wasn't.
Really, I got mine from Netflix. No problem.
Actually, you can see it. It may be in the. I don't know. It's not necessarily in public domain, I guess, but it was. I noticed that it was on like a streaming site.
All right. Yeah, I mean, sometimes a lot of these movies can be tough to get your hands on.
This is one of the better known Ray Harryhausen movie, but I think it is partly because the creature design is so memorable.
Right.
It begs for us to just do something with it, like re-edit it somehow, or and I keep thinking, like, what if you put anybody? What if Spencer Tracy were in this role? No character development, but would there be any would there be a glimmer from Spencer Tracy?
Right? Here's the thing. And we talked about it earlier. We know the creature effects are terrific, and they might put as many of them in there as they could afford to do. Mm-hmm. But then there's all the other stuff. Now, the thing about Paul Christian is that he's supposed to be I get the impression as I was sort of looking at this, he's supposed to be sort of the obsessed. He's supposed to be sort of obsessed because he's driven for at least a third of the picture to get someone to validate the fact that he has actually seen this. So he goes to the sea captain. He tries to go to the sea captain and doesn't see him. He finds somebody else who is sort of on board who will come to the States and will say that will pick out a picture like he has, and then convince the professor to then call a guy in the National Guard, I think, but he doesn't do anything. They just have to wait, and then the monster comes closer. So he's spending a certain amount of time sort of kind of driven and obsessed trying to convince people to do things. But I don't know. I think it was fine, but if you put somebody like Spencer Tracy or Cagney or, Frederick March, I mean, I don't know who you would put in, Van Johnson. You put somebody in there who kind of would be able to be handsome and then also be a leading man to sort of like to carry on the idea that he's trying to. Go ahead.
I got 2 words for you, Adam. Elvis Presley.
Elvis.
There's a big hunking dinosaur running around out there, man. Come on, this thing's big, man.
My God.
I mean, it's gonna cause a whole lot of trouble.
Can you imagine Elvis? That would be fantastic. I love it. I actually kind of like the idea of Van Johnson. I think that's pretty cool.
It's very acceptable. I think
there we go.
Just, trying to get him to, it was an obsession to try and get someone to validate what he was saying, and then once that was happened, then it became, how do you defend the East Coast from this thing? But he didn't change, his expressions didn't really change that much, and I'm not really sure why. I don't know whether, I don't feel like, I think as Drew said earlier, there wasn't a whole lot of, they were just reading their lines, the love story part of it was really just sort of there wasn't a whole lot of chemistry there. But it didn't seem like he was, even though he's supposed to be the hunky scientist, you could have even gotten the professor from Gilligan's Island, who was in This Island Earth, to sort of be that guy, and it would have been okay. You could have put the lead from This Island Earth into this picture, and that would have been okay. Something about him just not feeling strong enough and maybe emoting enough. I think he principally is kind of like maybe the part that was very subdued by comparison. And I think it's a subdued performance.
Well, we also, like, everybody wants to be in science fiction, big science fiction special effects movies these days because that's where the money is. But this also, like if you were in a monster picture back in the 50s, that was considered positively low rent, and a lot of actors just did not bring their A game if they were in one of these movies.
That's possible.
Well, it's true, but it was. There were Val Lewton pictures and everything sort of at the time, as well. But Steve McQueen was in The Blob. Of course, it was very early in his career. But it didn't hurt.
No. There's definitely. I love Creature from the Black Lagoon, and I think most of the cast in that legitimately puts in a good performance. But that was a Universal. That was a Universal production. This was an independent film that was later bought out by Warner Brothers.
Really? What's the movie where Russell Johnson, the professor, right? Russell Johnson, I think that's his name.
Yeah.
Is he in Invasion of the Body Snatchers? I'm trying to remember. There's a movie where he's been taken over by aliens and he stares into the sun, and they realize that he's an alien because he's staring into the sun.
Stares into the sun?
I want to say that's I Married a Monster from Outer Space.
God, I hope you're right. That's the cigarette.
Okay. Don't let me like derail everything.
No, I just want to see.
my bizarre. So I'll figure that out. If anybody knows the name of the movie where they realize that the professor is an alien because he's staring into the sun, just let me know and then I'll go watch it. He is in This Island Earth. He's also in It Came from Outer Space, Attack of the Crab Monsters, The Space Children. So he got around. Okay. I can't believe we talked for an hour about this movie. Holy mackerel. Okay. We should definitely wrap up and do our final thoughts and endorsements. Do you want to do those together or do final thoughts and then come around for endorsements? Why don't we do the? Go ahead.
I always like it when we do the endorsements separate. Just say.
All right. Then that I buy that. I totally buy into that. That's fine. Okay. So final thoughts. I think it was Drew, Adam, Jamie, and me. Final thoughts on The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, the second movie in our Ray Harryhausen retrospective. Drew, take it away.
I like this movie. I don't think it's going to be... It would not be the first Ray Harryhausen movie I would show anybody, because I think it's not, as we've all demonstrated through our comments, it's not the most exciting movie. But, man, we talk often about how it would be cool to be able to live inside one of these movies. Like, this is I just like seeing all the 1950s clothes and cars and just the look of that time period. So I like watching this movie, but it's not, out of the movies we have planned for this retrospective, this is definitely the one I'm the least enthusiastic about.
Outstanding. Okay. Jamie, final thoughts?
I like this movie. It's, again, not my favorite Harryhausen feature, but I do like it. And I do like the fact that it's kind of an introduction to scary movie for children. It feels like it's something that you could put in front of a 5-year-old and they would watch it, and you don't really have to worry about anything too bad or too gory. But in a way, it's almost like this is why you have to get your vaccinations, if you believe in it. But with kind of an introduction to science in that way, and I think that would be kind of an interesting way to introduce a movie to, like, these types of movies to children. But as an adult watching it, yeah, it's kind of it'd probably be a good drinking game in there somewhere. But it's pretty. I don't know. It's entertaining enough to help you go to sleep at night.
Yes.
That's my take on things.
All right, excellent. Adam, final thoughts on Beast from 20,000 Fathoms?
Well, I mean, you heard what I said kind of all evening, but I mean, I suppose I keyed because I love. It's one of those things that I can see the greatness in this picture, and I do really love it, partly because it's fundamentally part of my childhood, and also because I have a family tie to it, and also because, it's endured, for all these years. It's still it's a classic picture. It doesn't suffer from a whole lot of the other tropes that sort of other movies sort of its time, I think, would have made this a real B movie. Having said all this stuff, I joked about it, I don't think this is a B movie for its time. I think that it's actually better than a B movie, for its release time, and it has actually held up over the years, mostly because of the great work by Harryhausen. And I think that is one of the things that has made it stand out. But they also, I think the filmmakers treated it as something other than, drive-in movie fare. It wasn't the teenage, kids involved. It wasn't, it was actually a very, we'll call it a serious picture for the moment. But I mean, it didn't have any of those tropes that I think would have made it a forgettable picture, or would have dropped it down into the B category. And I really do think that it influenced at least a decade, if not a generation, of pictures of its type. And so for that reason, I would put it up with a King Kong, a Mighty Joe Young, and I think or Godzilla, certainly the Raymond Burr Godzilla. But I think, which the ending makes no sense to me with the Raymond Burr Godzilla, but that's a different story. But I think I do think it's an important picture that even inspired, Cloverfield and Jurassic Park and whatever else. And I think it's a really important film. And I think that the filmmakers, and we talked about just the whole notion of adding in not just treating it in something other than a 1950s drive-in picture style, but also adding in a twist and increased tension once he hits land, like having the creature have an airborne disease, is really interesting, and particularly for its time, with this kind of picture, sort of unheard of. And so I think that's one of the things that really elevates it. So I still put this picture on the shelf as being, even though it's sleep-inducing at times, I think it really is a great picture, and it's one of those things that anybody serious about monster movies, needs to at least have seen this picture once, if not of having had the benefit of seeing it when they were younger and then seeing it again now. So I really hold it up as an A-class picture. That's
really wonderful. That to me, this is one of these movies that I think you mentioned Famous Monsters of Filmland, the magazine, and Beast from 20,000 Fathoms is one of these movies that when I was a kid, you would read about, but was impossible to get a hold of. So
that's right.
You just saw the stills, and which is the case for really a lot of these classic films that I get to see now. And it's hard for people today to imagine that there was a point when films that had come out 15 or so years before, unless they were a major movie that were in like a major re-release for some reason or another, you might never chance to see them again. You might randomly catch them on the Late Show. So you really had to rely on what was often the memory of critics writing in their research books who also didn't have prints of the film. And so we live in such a magical time now where you can just watch Beast from 20,000 Fathoms or Frederick March in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and not just have to rely on somebody who with a couple stills of it and saying, well, Frederick March was like this or like that. So there's some great bits here. This is definitely a part of history. It's only 80 minutes, so make a pot of coffee and just sort of. I like this notion of just sort of chatting your way through a lot of the talky bits and wait until you get to the exciting action. I would never say that if you were showing this at the Alamo Drafthouse, in which case, in a movie theater you would sit quietly and you'd watch it the way movies are meant to be watched. But I think you would have my permission, if you're watching this at home, to basically just sort of chat through the many, many, many talky scenes to get to the good stuff. So, all told, we actually got an hour out of this. There's more here to think about than at first glance. And let's go into endorsements. So back around again. Drew, do you have anything for us this week?
Yes, I do. I would like to endorse John Dies at the End. It's the new Don, can never pronounce his last name even though he's one of my favorite directors, Cole Scarlelli. He did Phantasm and Bubba Hotep. And this is an adaptation of an underground novel, and I've been describing this movie to people. Imagine if Pineapple Express and Ghostbusters had a child, abandoned said child. Child is then adopted by Naked Lunch, who locks it in a basement and trains it to cage fight. And that is the tone of this movie.
Wow. Can you put that on Facebook, please? Because that is awesome.
I did put that on Facebook. And it's a really, really good rip-roaring existential horror comedy. And it's not a perfect movie, but I guarantee you're not going to see another movie like it this year.
All right, wow. Very cool. Very cool. All right, then I will take that advice because you're the second person who said that I must watch this. Jamie, do you have anything to endorse for us?
I would like to induce the Rockabilly on the Route Festival. It's coming up on June 6th, 7th, and 8th in Tucumcari, New Mexico. It's to benefit a museum for Route 66. So it's kind of a exciting thing to be a part of. Danger Cakes is playing on Friday and Saturday, and we'll be opening for Wanda Jackson and the Chop Tops. So it's kind of for a good cause, help us preserve some music and legendary travel, on the beautiful Route 66.
Very cool. Very, very cool. So, Adam, do you have anything to endorse for us?
A couple of things. I may have endorsed this one before, but I find myself still liking it, maybe even liking it more. And that's Thursday nights on NBC, Hannibal. I'm finding that I'm really liking this series. I think Mads Mikkelsen is eminently watchable. And
Explain to me the concept of Hannibal. Is this because I have not watched it. I've been trying to. So is it like Silence? Is it extending Silence of the Lambs into?
It comes from I think just a couple of lines. It may have been The Red Dragon. It's basically it was basically about Hannibal before he was caught, when he was a practicing psychiatrist, and he was
consulting with the police, I guess.
Right, and this is the whole thing: is he's actually consulting with a profiler and whatever else, but he's also sort of doing these things. And what's interesting is it's interesting to watch him because he is a consummate chef and connoisseur and kind of whatever else, and he's not only a killer, but he is also, a cannibal. He's actually arranging these. He's actually harvesting, what he's sort of killing, and he's sort of creating these feasts for the guests and kind of what else. But he's doing it in such an amazing sort of a culinary virtuoso sort of Epicurean way that it's fascinating. As you guys may know, my wife is a chef, so it even makes it more interesting as she watches him delicately, tie a knot with some twine around some pancetta that's wrapping, a lung stuffed with, whatever. And then she goes, "That's absolutely perfect. That's the way you would do it." It's sort of fascinating to sort of watch it. He's incredibly fastidious and a very snappy dresser. But actually the writing is good and it's presented really well. And I have to say, I'm really liking it. So either I should like this picture or be really worried about my wife, who clearly is harvesting my organs for a meal. But in either case, I endorse this series because I'm really liking it. And the other thing is, for those of you who are in Southern California, the Kubrick exhibition at LACMA, at the Los Angeles County Museum. It has a lot of artifacts and things from Kubrick's career, and from The Shining, and from these various things. The whole exhibition that runs, I think, through June 30th. But it's a fascinating sort of look at Kubrick and a bunch of things that have been collected from his long and kind of varied career.
Well, that's fantastic. All right, mine is a little esoteric, but I really want other people to discover this thing as well. There is a blog that is dedicated to nothing but book cover art called My Love Haunted Heart. And here's the thing. This blog does nothing but post book covers and reviews, but book covers of Gothic horror and Gothic romance from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, before basically Gothic went away. And it's wonderful because most of the stuff that they are reviewing are not in print and they're not in Kindle. These are essentially lost works. And so these people this woman, I suppose, is just taking these Gothic paperbacks and she scans them and she posts the cover and she does a review of the book. And it's astonishing. It is so beautiful to look at all of these paintings that, were painted for books back in the 60s and 70s, with wonderful titles like A Stranger in My Grave by Margaret Miller and A Touch of the Witch, A Woman Possessed, A Beauty That Must Die, Charlotte Must Hunt. I mean, whatever. The Gilded Sarcophagus. All of them are wonderful, and all of them are lost, because these are books that when people's main entertainment was still books, there were many, many more books. And so these books are just all sort of gone. And it's wonderful to look at the paintings and kind of just sort of revel in this lost world. So the website is called My Love Haunted Heart. You can just Google that, but it's arts.wordpress.com. But I'm truly impressed by this, and I just wanted to share it in case some other crazy person enjoyed taking a look at these. And that's it for me.
That reminds me. When are you going to do Mr. Sardonicus?
Oh, I would love to do Mr. Sardonic. You know what? I think we need to do a William Castle retrospective, actually. I think that would be fantastic. That would be wonderful.
That would be cool.
Yes, I like that idea. If we do a William Castle retrospective, I think we need to actually video ourselves doing an insert, sort of like the one that William Castle puts into Mr. Sardonicus, where he suggests that everybody vote on whether the main character gets delivered.
Oh, that's a great idea. I mean, he was such a kind of a weird show.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, guys, for being on. If you're listening, please, vote as well on iTunes and leave us a review. Tell your friends. Come to the Facebook page and request things and argue with us and tell us that we're idiots for not respecting Beasts from 20,000 Fathoms nearly enough. We tease because we love. And we will see you very, very soon. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.